Okay, so I thought this one would be an interesting topic to look at, and it's about Britain's place in the world and looking at Europe as a whole. Actually, how we go forward. I make no apology for saying that I'm a European. I'm British, but I am a European, and as far as I'm concerned, that sentiment hasn't changed because of this country leaving the European Union in 2020. I feel a strong connection to Europe. I mean, we're an island nation, but our history is intrinsically linked with the continent. No question about that. I think the events of the last fortnight really need to be a wake-up call. First, I'm going to show you a bit like some of the headlines today because they make for interesting reading. I haven't read these in detail, but first one from the Times. This. Trump invites Zelensky to secure peace in weeks, and there's an interesting image of Macron and Trump looking very pally. Um, whether that's just French charm or whether they really do have a rapport, I don't know, but it certainly will contradict some of the overtures of the past week in terms of the differences between the European and American position. And this is the eye. Stop blaming Putin for war. America's message to UK ahead of Crunch Starmer visit to White House. I'll say this for Keir Starmer. I don't envy his position. He's having to strike a really difficult diplomatic balance in a way that not many prime ministers have had to face. Because not many prime ministers have had to deal with Donald Trump. And that sort of basically that sort of situation coming from the United States. I'm not saying there hasn't been awkward American presidents and some tensions. We've had differences with America in the past. I do think the special relationship, I hate to say it, but I think we really need to maybe reconsider what that really means. Now, before I continue, I don't want to be misunderstood. I'm not anti-American. I don't see myself as anti-American. There's many things about the United States of America I have a lot of affection for. Um, but honestly, Trump's second win, and he won. It's not like a fluke where he just won the Electoral College. He won comfortably. It wasn't a landslide, but he won comfortably. So whatever way we look at it, the majority of eligible Americans who could vote put this man back into power. I think that says something about the American mindset. No disrespect to those who vote for Harris or the many, many Americans who are critical of Donald Trump. The simple reality is more Americans decided to give this man another chance, despite everything we know about him, despite everything he's said and done. I think we're in a very, very strange situation in the world today because you have autocrats like Xi Jinping in China, Putin in Russia, and that's nothing new. There's always been dictators in the world. There's always been that situation. But I struggle to think of a time when the American president has also been so pandering to those dictators, those autocrats, in a way that's particularly to Putin. I, I struggle to think. This isn't to say that American presidents are, all of Trump's predecessors are squeaky clean. I'm not suggesting that for a second. Many of them had a lot of blood on their hands. I'm not disputing that. But I'm talking about balance of, I'm talking about diplomacy, I'm talking about statesmanship. Those presidents who engaged in some very dubious policies, at least they had a diplomacy that Trump doesn't have. I mean, Trump and Nixon have often been compared, but I think there's differences. I think Nixon, although he could be crude at times, he had a tense relationship with the press. I just can't see Richard Nixon coming out with some of the rubbish that Trump has come out with. So I think Nixon was a lot smarter. Um, I don't know what Trump's intelligence is. I really don't know. I don't think he's completely stupid because I don't think you get to that position. It used to be said about George W. Bush, Texas has lost its village idiot. I think that was a misconception. I don't think you get to be in the White House if you've got nothing upstairs. Um, Trump's clearly smart enough to have got as wealthy as he is and to get the most powerful job in the world. So I don't think he could be dismissed as stupid, but I do think he is erratic. I do think he's ignorant about many things, dangerously ignorant. Um, and I think the situation that we're in is European leaders are dealing with an American president who is not a normal American president. There's always a little bit of arrogance from Washington. There's always that American exceptionalism. And you see it with every president. Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, Joe Biden, the Bushes. It's always there. That comes with hegemony. I mean, certainly the British Empire, we were arrogant when we were at the very top. That's the way it is. But there is something unique in this situation, and I think it's even worse in Trump's second term, actually, particularly with the presence of Elon Musk, who wasn't there in his first term. I think Musk is a very, very. I've just seen a thing on Facebook saying, does Elon Musk have good intentions for the world? And I responded with a resounding no. And the reason I say that, this isn't meant to be a video predominantly about Musk, but I'll touch on this. Musk has done some good things. He used some of his technology to help people with spinal problems. His Starlink programs have been very helpful in Ukraine, although he's now threatening to cut it off. He has helped hurricane victims in the Carolinas, I understand. But, some philanthropic gestures, does that cover the lies that he's told? Does that cover his pandering to extremists? Does it cover his own erratic nature? I don't trust Elon Musk for a second. I mean, should we really be so grateful that the world's richest man has done some philanthropic things? I'm not sure. I mean, Musk is so insanely wealthy that he's been tipped to be the world's first trillionaire, and he's making profit all the time. So I don't think, and this idea of cleaning up the swamp, cleaning up corruption, two issues there. No one elected Elon Musk, point one. And point two, who keeps him accountable? So it's all very well vilifying government employees. And I'm not saying that there's no corruption there. I'm not saying that there maybe needs to be some overhaul. But is Elon Musk the person to do it? Who keeps him accountable? Donald Trump? I mean, I think Trump's absolutely rotten. He's a convicted felon. We're looking at an administration here that's full of Putin cheerleaders and charlatans, people who have sold their soul to be in this administration. I would say someone like Marco Rubio, who used to be a half-decent Republican. This was a man who stood up to dictators. He condemned the Castro regime, and now those talks in Riyadh, I'm so disgusted at what they've done to Ukraine in the last 2 weeks. I'm talking about the American delegation. But, the Times headline would appear to contradict that. Zelensky invited to the White House. This after Trump calling him a dictator. Well, Abraham Lincoln and Winston Churchill had war powers. They didn't have elections during their respective wars. If that's a litmus test for a dictator, that's absurd. Donald Trump, of all people, is in no position to lecture about democracy, given his position in 2021, given the fact that he's pandering to Putin. I'm just so disgusted by what's happened in the last few weeks. And there is a theory, there's this idea that, it's just Trump being Trump. Boris Johnson came out with his thing that, Russia invaded Ukraine, but don't believe everything you hear about Trump. More or less along those lines. But he would say that he's a world leader who's very close to Trump. I don't entirely trust Johnson either, but that's beside the point. The point here is there's this idea that we shouldn't really listen to what Trump says. Even though he's one of the most powerful people in the world, is he the most powerful? I don't know. Elon Musk may well be. I don't think Putin is. Xi Jinping has a claim to that. I don't know. But I am convinced that Donald Trump is not helping America internationally. Maybe MAGA Republicans think he's helping them domestically, but I'm convinced that Donald Trump is seriously damaging America's reputation. I mean, if you look at most of the reports that have been coming out regarding the things that Trump has been coming out with, almost universally, the feedback is negative. And the only people that seem to support Trump are MAGA voting Americans. That seemed to be it, really. Even a while back, there was people around the world who, kind of support Trump. Even they have not gone silent, but they're not as vocal as they were before. It's just, I think he's by far the worst president in American history, and it isn't it by some measure. I used to think, okay, Andrew Johnson, who rolled back on civil rights, the notoriously corrupt administration of Warren G. Harding, the much maligned presidencies of James Buchanan and Franklin Pierce. But I think Trump is the worst. Of course, Richard Nixon's corruption. I think Trump is the worst because the things he has done is basically unprecedented. For an American president to cozy up to a Russian dictator the way he is doing at the price of a European country that has been invaded, it's utterly sickening. Ronald Reagan said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. What does Donald Trump say? Oh, it takes two to tango when he met Zelensky last time at the UN. But this is the situation that we're in. It's this idea that, some people will argue, well, Trump says this stuff to kind of take Putin off guard. I'm not sure I really believe that, because even if it's true, even if it's some sort of strategy to confuse Putin, like is he on my side or not, from Putin's point of view, it's demoralizing for allies. It's very demoralizing for the Ukrainians. I mean, to hear Trump call their president a dictator, and to hear him actually say that they're responsible for starting the war. It was Russia that invaded Ukraine 3 years ago, not the other way around. I'm just so sickened by that. So even if Trump is just saying that to try and mislead Putin, it's a very dangerous strategy because it demoralizes allies. I think Europe, and I'm including Britain here, needs to seriously step up. If anything good has come out of all of this, with Trump's rhetoric, it's perhaps a reminder to Europeans that this is what we're dealing with. We can't trust Trump, so we need to step up. But I don't think Trump deserves any thanks for that. What he's done is shameful. But I said at the start of the video, I don't envy Keir Starmer. I think he is in a very difficult balancing act. Now, I'd love Starmer to turn around and say, we won't be lectured by Donald Trump and really, really be vocal about him. But I'm also charitable enough to realise that the Prime Minister simply can't do that, to the world's biggest economy. Unfortunately, to some extent, not aggravating Trump too much is probably important, but I do think there has to be limits. How much can Trump get away with? I know at the American resolution at the UN, France and Britain abstained. Good. Now, initially I thought maybe they abstained because they didn't want to offend Trump. Perhaps it's more a case of abstaining because they didn't want to endorse this American resolution, which basically didn't attribute any blame to Russia. That's preposterous, utterly preposterous. And by the way, the stuff the Americans are coming out with, that would be like saying they were responsible for Pearl Harbor. There's another point that I want to make here, which is very important. There's a lot being said from hawkish Americans, not hawkish Americans actually, hawkish only in the sense of their hostility to Europe. It's kind of this narrative of Europeans haven't sacrificed. They need to stop relying on America, or they need to. It's basically like the old jingoistic trope about surrendering Europeans. Well, this is something to consider. Article 5, NATO's Article 5 has triggered only once, if I've got this right, and that was after 9/11. to support the United States, particularly with the campaign in Afghanistan. Now, over 1,000 soldiers from Britain, Canada, France, Germany, and other contingent nations, many of them European nations, died alongside thousands of Americans. So European soldiers have literally died fighting in an American-led campaign. That's something that MAGA Republicans should remember when they're insulting Europeans. And whatever people think of the campaign in Afghanistan, the principal purpose was that Al-Qaeda had found a safe haven under the Taliban there. I happen to think that war was more justified than the war in Iraq. That's for another video. Um, I do think that Europe's been naive. I do think we've been overly reliant on America, perhaps. But, the collective European economy is significantly bigger than the United States. I think it's this old thing of we better not provoke them. It's a similar mindset to China. But we're at a point here where we have to really, in Britain, we need to be realistic. We cannot we cannot trust Trump. We just cannot trust the erratic nature of the American administration right now. It's not anti-American. It's about being realistic about the way Donald Trump is. I'm not saying we shouldn't work with him. That's impossible. But we need to get closer to our European neighbours. This is just the reality. And what really, really irks me is the mindset of Brexiteers that whenever a British Prime Minister discusses this, it's like, oh, he's betraying Brexit. I'm not talking about rejoining the European Union. There's things I don't particularly like about the EU. But we have to be realistic. Look at the world we are in. There's the erratic nature of the Trump administration. There is a very belligerent Russia and China. Yes, we need to be close to the Commonwealth, but it just makes absolute sense that we are close to our closest neighbours. France, Germany, the Netherlands, Ireland. It just makes absolute sense. We're going to have disagreements with them, but they'll be relatively small compared to some of the things that are going on in the world. I just think that we need to get realistic. European countries do need to up defence spending. There's no question about it. I would suggest if Donald Trump continues this rhetoric, this pandering to Putin, I actually saw something. Apparently a Kazakh agent claims that Donald Trump was recruited by the FSB. He's a Russian agent. Now, I'd be a little bit careful about believing too much of that. It's fun to think that's a possibility, but it's shocking to think. I don't know, because I think Trump's too obvious. He's got too big a mouth to be a spy. But certainly, I think the stuff he's coming out with helps Russia. It helps Putin. The thing is, people might frame this as, well, why are you against peace? Why are you against... nobody wants peace more than the Ukrainians. The point here is not at any price. What sort of peace is it when they're not even invited to the talks? What sort of peace is it? And I know that Zelensky's been invited to the White House, but he wasn't invited to those key talks in Riyadh. There's just so many red flags here. And, basically blackmailing a country that has seen itself subjugated, that's seen its POWs tortured, its women raped, its children kidnapped, blackmailing that country for natural resources. Oh, give us your iron ore and we'll help you. It's disgusting, actually. What we've seen in the last fortnight is a complete and utter failure of American leadership. This isn't a strong America. This is an American administration that decent Americans should be embarrassed by. Anyway, I interrupted myself. I was going to say that if Trump keeps coming out with this anti-European rhetoric, he claims Starmer and Macron haven't done enough with Ukraine, done enough in the war. I think that European countries, perhaps Germany, for instance, need to seriously consider: are we going to allow the Americans to have bases here? Maybe we can. There's still a few American bases in the UK. I'm not saying that should be the approach right now, but if Trump continues this hostility, in the form of tariffs, in the form of insults, if he just continues doing this, I think European countries do need to push back a bit. 101, Britain America, France, America. You can't take on the power of America, but united European countries can. What happened when Trump put those massive tariffs on Canada and Mexico? Canada and Mexico fought back. I think that, unfortunately, in an ideal world, America would be a reliable partner. But something has really happened under Donald Trump, and we're seeing a really significant shift where, unfortunately, the United States of America is a major Western country, the most powerful Western country that just is no longer trustworthy under this administration. It's awful. It's awful. But we think of the West, we think of Europe, we think of Canada, and then expanding that to Australia, New Zealand, and then partners like Japan and South Korea, the Philippines, perhaps. But the United States of America, under this president, I just don't know. It's so erratic. It's so unpredictable. It's so. So what I propose is certainly we need to work with the United States in the same way we still have channels open with China. But it's got to this point. I'm not saying we treat the US like China, but well, actually, Starmer's ridiculously soft on China. I think it's a big Achilles heel in this government. But I don't envy Starmer, because he's having to listen to Trump's insults and speak up for the consistent stance that governments in this country have had on Ukraine, including his, which inevitably means taking a different position from Trump whilst not aggravating Trump. That's not easy. So I don't envy him. But I do hope that Starmer has some backbone and isn't afraid to say, Mr. President, I disagree with you. If Trump threatens tariffs, if he wants to have a tantrum, then what I am absolutely adamant about is we cannot have our foreign policy dictated by the tweets of Elon Musk or the threats of tariffs by Donald Trump. Bullies think that force alone works. We need to frankly stand up to Trump's America. And I think the way to do that is not to overtly pander. But I just find the current situation so astonishing. It's just, Europe needs to step up. This country needs to work with its closest allies in Europe. Defence spending needs to increase. European defence institutions need to step up. We need to realise what's happening. Putin won't stop at Ukraine if he gets his way. It's some very sobering thoughts here, and I'll leave it there. But I just think it's a sad thing that we can no longer trust the American administration. I don't think we can. So this is the special relationship. I think under Trump, it's, if not gone, it's just a very different format. Trump might talk about his affection for the royal family in the UK, but his foreign policy, cozying up to Putin, it's a complete paradox of that.